everyone, it is 6:03 on October 8th, 2025, and this is the Master Plan Update Committee. And the first thing we will do I'll call this meeting to order here at 6:04 now, and I will quickly review the remote meeting instructions. This meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board commission members will be remote, and remote attendance shall count towards quorum. Meeting may be broadcast live and will be recorded on ECAT. To use Zoom, you'll need to use the link on the agenda or download the Zoom application, create an account, use one of the call-in numbers listed on the agenda, and you'll need a webinar ID to join by phone only. While conducting meetings remotely, we'll endeavor to keep meeting operations as close to our standard procedures as possible. However, use of this platform will necessitate some additional meeting protocols. One, while board members or commissioners and applicants will be on video and audio, public participants will join the webinar as an attendee, meaning they're muted with no video feed from them. Two, during public testimony portion of the meeting, members of the public can be recognized by using the raise hand function found under the participants from Zoom, or to make a request with a Q&A function. Three, if there's a markup function in Zoom, which will allow you to call out specific areas of presentation materials. Four, as in any public meeting, indecent behavior will not be tolerated. Anyone who abuses the use of the meeting platform will be terminated from the meeting. Five, business will be handled at the times and indicated on the agenda. Business not concluded in the allotted time will be tabled to the end of the meeting to allow for timely logins and remote attendance. Six, board members are asked to announce themselves when making a motion in a second so that it will be clear to the audience and minute takers who made motions. All votes will be made by roll call. Seven, when all business indicated on the agenda has been completed, the members will vote to adjourn the meeting, signaling the end of the meeting and termination of the ECAT recording. All participants will be disconnected from the webinar at that time. Applicants will join the webinar as an attendee and promoted to panelist at their agenda item. Applicants then are able to share their screens and present their materials as much as possible. Presentation materials should be provided beforehand and loaded in permit eyes so that materials can be included in public record. Individual board chairs and staff may wish to keep screen sharing to their computer. Applicants are encouraged to speak with staff prior to meeting on how material will be presented. Okay. How's that? Good? Okay.
And then roll call vote, I guess.
Do a roll call attendance. Wayne, do you want me to do that, or you want to?
Yeah, and it's efficient if you can call on people. I find usually works well, so folks don't talk over each other.
Yeah.
If you can see everybody.
I am going to go through that.
I'm also happy to do it if it's easier for you.
I'm just pulling up. This is what I'm looking for. Okay, I have the list of members. So, Joanne?
Yes.
Stephen Drown?
Present.
Sahara?
Present.
I'm sorry. Mark Lamb?
No.
Chris Lopes?
Present.
Liz Bornstein? Kelly Percio?
Present.
Lauren Loomis? Ernie Smith? Melissa Davis?
Present.
Tana Babbitt?
Present.
And Ken, I have Ken Kirkland as a member, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
Ken Kirkland?
Yep. Yeah.
Hi, Ken. I believe you are our first agenda item as our next agenda item, which is welcome new planning director, Ken Kirkland. So welcome, Ken.
Hold on just a minute. I'm going to get my background noise to go away. Hold on just a minute.
Did I get everyone? I just read through the list of members.
Yes, you did.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
All right. So good evening, everyone. I still haven't gotten the low bandwidth issue sorted out, even though I'm connected with the Ethernet and everything. But just to say hello to everybody. This is I believe, Wayne, this is what, my 5th or 6th week here?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So this is my 8th year doing this and 15th year involved in planning in some capacity. So, and I actually just got I was in the city of Woonsocket in Holman, Rhode Island, where I'm from originally. And I actually got our comprehensive plan was approved by this, formally approved by the state. That was the last thing that we did before I left. And so the certificate is hanging on the wall where my desk used to be. So I'm not unfamiliar with master plans and updates and the whole process and whatnot. So glad to help and kind of shepherd this through the end, I suppose, but glad to help all the ways.
Thank you. Happy to have you. Okay, so the next agenda item, we'll just move right along. Review and accept September 24th meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review? Would anyone like to make a motion to approve, accept these minutes?
Babbitt moves to accept the September 24th minutes.
Great.
Zigmund, second.
Okay, I'll do a roll call. Dostumian, yes. Babbitt,
Yes.
Brown,
Yes.
Defensor,
Yes.
Percio,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Kirkland.
I'll vote as present, but I wasn't there.
Okay. Lopes
Yes.
and Zigmund.
Yes.
Great. Okay. September 24th meeting minutes are accepted. And so now we're going to move on to the review of the master plan update and public comments. And I believe we said that we were going to start with the grid of so the comments.
Yeah, I think the concept, if I'm remembering accurately from last time, was so the goal of this evening, of course, is to go through the comments, the red lines, the suggestions, agree on the near final version that we're sending to the select board, and feel comfortable with that. As I was riffing a little bit with some folks before the meeting, hopefully this will be the last meeting of this group, and this will get all that work done. And then it might be most effective to start the conversation looking at that goals and actions matrix, and then work backwards through the document from there so we could really focus our attention on the actual action items. And so Jeff, does that make sense? Is that a good way to approach this, do you think?
Yep, I think that's great. And I think just talking about the executive summary and the vision statement is on is on the list as well. So that
Yeah.
sounds perfect.
Wayne and Jeff, when was the last time you guys sent out the goals grid? I can't find that right now. That's what I was looking for.
Is it part of the most recent one we sent out like a week or so ago?
With the five attachments? Was it one of those?
I think it might be in the red line master plan attached at the end.
Yep, as one document.
Okay, that makes sense. Got it.
And then I think there's Jeff has some changes that have incorporated some of the comments we've received since then for tonight.
Perfect.
Yep.
Okay. Page like 47, 48. All right, got it.
Perfect. So I'll jump right in. I mean, I think we started the last meeting and we actually read, I think Wayne read almost every single public comment that was received into the record. And then the committee lost quorum. So we pretty much stopped that meeting at that point. But one of the things that came up was putting together a short table to show the comments, some preliminary responses, and then really just a column whether there was a change or not to the master plan. And there was a couple. So a couple of potential changes. And so I'd like to jump right in. I'll share my screen and walk through that. But again, kind of based on the fact that the committee read into the record all the, I think all except one comment, which I have flagged. I'm not going to spend too much time on the actual comment and just kind of walk the committee through this document, which would become part of an appendices. And so on the left side is a comment number. It doesn't necessarily equate to, Wayne had been numbering them in terms of PDFs, and we lost track of that numbering system, but they're numbered just to show the overall sort of idea of how many comments were received. So those are on the left. The summary of the comments is on the left side as well, and then a preliminary response. So the first three comments kind of lumped together are from the same person, with a note about, their preference that Easton is a single family dwelling type community, and Easton wants single family homes and things like that. And so the preliminary response um, was also, this person also referenced the 2013 survey, which we did look at as part of our project, but it's still on the website. So it really had two questions related to kind of new housing. And I've included an excerpt in this document to show the exact questions and the percentage of responses. And then what we're talking about here is the current plan. The current draft has a vision statement, which you've all seen at this point. At least it's been transmitted by email. That the vision statement includes this, provide diverse housing options so seniors can age in place and young families can afford to stay, and diverse housing options to meet the needs of seniors, young families, and residents of all incomes. And then we looked at the housing data, which shows that 75% of Easton's housing stock is single family and 25% is multi-unit. And that's just a statistic that's in the plan. And then we're also just calling out that the housing production plan, we referenced that in the master plan as a source. And so really one of the items in there is to advocate for a variety of housing types, including single family, multi-family units, and mixed use developments to create vibrant, walkable neighborhoods and support economic vitality. And then the goal that refers to housing most specifically is consider areas for compact housing districts, condominiums, duplexes, and small single family units on small lots or land owned in common. And really the finding is that taken together, the plan supports a wide range of housing options in response to those three comments. And our recommendation at this point is no specific changes as a result of that set of comments. The next comment was about transit and how we could use a survey of how many seniors use the existing transportation system. So the response is that the master plan includes the following action, which would address this comment: analyze current and potential Easton ridership demands for seniors, for employment centers, and other users. So we're acknowledging that that would be part of that discussion moving forward and recommend no changes. Item number 5 is the percentages of different race and growth, and why don't you consider them all? And we think that we do. So figure 1-4 is based on the American Community Survey and shows a decrease in respondents identifying as white from 93.7% in 2010 to 79.4% in 2023. So I feel like the plan acknowledges that comment and no recommended changes there. 6 is changing the name of the planning process and final plan to comprehensive plan rather than master plan. I think we want to acknowledge that it's a good statement. Our response, proposed response, is that our scope was based on the town's RFP, which included the phrase master plan, and really it relates to the 2013 plan, which is Easton, Vision Easton Master Plan. The select board voted to establish a committee entitled Master Plan Update Committee. And the idea is meaningful, but we believe that a name change at this late junction could cause confusion. So this is a question that we defer to this committee, but without that input directly, we would have recommended no change. So I guess that's an action that this committee could consider right now, whether you think there's merit in changing the title of the final product to comprehensive plan.
Does anyone have any strong feelings on that? I tend to agree with you, Jeff, that at this time it could cause confusion and it might be a consideration for the next iteration of the plan, but I tend to think at this late stage it might be a little confusing considering all of the things that are already labeled master plan committee. And
I agree. I agree with that as well.
Agree.
I agree.
Great. So Wayne, we didn't actually talk about this. I don't know if technically we need to have the committee vote. We can continue the document and then maybe vote at the end. But the finding would be no recommended changes based on that comment at this point. Number 7 was a suggestion to broaden the wording of one of the goals to be more positive, and consider you know, and they offered some recommended language. So we know that the language of minimizing impacts was part of the community compact, which was signed by multiple boards and elected officials in Easton. And I think we're suggesting that that language stay. That's the language as minimizing impacts. So when we get to the goals, we can highlight this, but we recommend to amend the goal to include the phrase vulnerable populations, including but not limited to. And then we keep the seniors and the rest of the statement intact, but we do add the caveat like including but not limited to make sure it's broad enough to cover. Item number 8 was requesting more emphasis on equity and creating Easton, Easton that is inclusive and inviting for all. Seniors are not the only priority population. And they wanted to see some language that others may need services, and then more language promoting diversity of race, income level within Easton. And so we want to acknowledge that concern, the comment, but we would do something similar, which is BSC recommends adding diverse and inclusive into the vision statement. And so when we get to the vision statement, it's a phrase about Easton being, the future version of itself and including diverse and inclusive within that group of text there. So I would say that's a pretty minor change that I've incorporated that into the vision statement, which we can get to a little bit later. 9 is another section, so they're referring to the matrix where all ages and abilities are called out, but looking for more language to either have priority populations listed or expand the language explicitly to include race. And the big note in the middle here is that between the draft that was published for public review and the draft that was submitted to the committee for the last meeting, we've actually changed the matrix around a little bit. So the other category got removed and was the goals were pushed into a different section. And what I wanted to emphasize here was that seniors are a major emphasis based on the age-friendly action plan. And then other goals related to communication, which were created, kind of grouped together, includes references to residents of all ages and abilities, and the transportation items refer to all, meet the needs of all residents. And then the vision statement refers to strengthening services and finances to maintain high quality of life for residents of all ages and backgrounds. And so BSC recommends we do change action 2 under goal 5 to read improve communication between the town and all residents, so those who may need support are able to easily find it. And so that's a pretty minor change to some words in that goal action, and so that'll show up in the matrix. 10 is the comment is that it states that we are planning a hotel in the document, which again is the draft master plan. It says it's planned for Stonehill College and the town in general. I'm not sure our tax revenue should be spent for that project. And so the middle column says that the draft includes the following statement on page 35 regarding a hotel, which was to assess the opportunities to add a mix of uses near Washington Street corridor and feasibility of siting a hotel to serve visitors of Stonehill and the town generally. So the clarification would just be that the draft master plan does not propose a possible hotel be built in town. It really identifies the potential need to examine feasibility, and such a project could be eligible for a state grant. So here, this is a conversation with the committee for tonight. We do recommend that this committee, talk about this briefly and decide whether the feasibility study should be added as an objective. Right now, it's not listed as an action. It's just listed in that paragraph on page 35, or to potentially remove the specific reference to the hotel, knowing that it may or may not be included in like a future process of looking at Washington Street. So this comment comes up. I'll just scroll for a second. This comment comes up 2 additional times. So one discussion would, I think, resolve this question that's come up 3 different ways.
I feel like it's a really specific thing to include in the body of a report. I think if it's kept, it needs to be moved into the recommendations, as you say, Jeff. But I also feel like it's too specific for a master plan. Typically, that would be in a more specific economic development or corridor study or something like that. So I think I'm leaning kind of towards removing it.
I second that.
That or if we're talking about just general, there may be instances in the next 10 years, or when if you're looking at the feasibility of looking at existing commercial corridors for different commercial uses, just a very broad statement on economic development and uses along commercial highly trafficked commercial corridors, period. I think that would say, yeah, there's a possibility. We're not going to include everything, but you'd be able to, yeah, it's clearly understood that your heavily trafficked commercial corridors are most likely going to be looked at they're always going to be looked at for possible, for expansion of uses or new uses, or something that works because of its nature as a commercial corridor.
So why do we need to call that out? I mean, we've been doing that right along, especially with economic development, but it wasn't called out specifically in a prior master plan. Why is it specific in this plan?
I can respond to that. So it did come up in the community engagement session. So, we have the small working groups and multiple people. It must have come up in other groups. It got reported out as something that at least the groups who were at that community meeting suggested the hotel sounded like a good idea in terms of economic development or that section. So that's where it is originating from. And our job was to reflect that out into the draft. But that's where it came from, was a few comments at the community meeting. So based on this, we will get to the section of text, but I think, just to make a suggestion for the group, when we get to page 35, it really probably would say, I just tried to highlight the text that says, assess the opportunities to add a mix of uses near the Washington Street corridor. That's the text of the master plan, and then there's a corresponding action item, which is really to assess the corridor. And so I think what I heard was that something like that could be rolled in or would be potentially part of a future project without specifically calling out, because we're not calling out the 6 other things that might be included in such a plan.
Yeah,
So
I think the more you could just roll over any similar language that you could just roll over with new from before, I think that would be the best bet on some of these. I mean, I think that's the best for some of these. I mean, you don't want to capture every single not every comment needs to be specifically included because, I thought there was a hotel that was going over here. Well, that may not be applicable, or that may not be something that's happening anytime soon, but the concept of we're always reviewing certain areas for, development or redevelopment. I think they said just a standard, topical comment or a sentence or two on that is really all that would be needed. Again, this is a 10-year master plan update. This is not this is not a particular economic development report on commercial corridors.
correct. And I think the highlight was really the Washington Street corridor needs additional study of a variety of different things. So I heard, does anyone object to removing that specific reference kind of based on the discussion? And we can look at the text again when we get into the master plan. And it comes up twice more, so we'll continue to talk about it. Comment number 11 was, again, there was a slight disconnect. We published a draft of the master plan for public review that did not have the executive summary. It was blank at that point. But then based on the last meeting and conversations, we actually drafted that. So you've seen it, it's been in the packet. But at this point, the comment was that, in a true plan, each of the goals and actions based on the data analysis should be traceable back to one top level vision statements. And then they're noting that some goals are tied but can the actions be sorted in some way that prioritize low-hanging fruit, easy to do, no, not over costly, and what is planned to be accomplished in the near term? So we've done some modification of the matrix to address short-term, ongoing short-term, midterm, and long-term. But then, the middle column, and this comes up twice actually. So the middle column says BSC scope was based on the town's RFP, which did not include creation of a vision statement. After the planning board meeting, a draft executive summary was prepared, which includes a general vision statement based on the public engagement and research completed as part of the process. So BSC recommends that the committee consider, a vision statement or similar broad statement to be included in the executive summary. And so we can talk about that. The executive summary was always expected, but I think we added, a vision statement into that. And we can discuss that a little bit later tonight. Number 12 was about one of the data points. So they're calling it slide 7. So this was on page 7 of that draft that was published for public review. And the question was about this middle age group, 40 to 49, increasing there was a certain number of people identified as increasing, but then children and youth category was decreasing. And then the person made a statement that most 40 to 49-year-olds have children in the 10 to 19-year-old group. And so what am I missing? So why did they not grow together? So our response is that the data, so it's table 1-2, they're all estimates. They're at estimated projections. And it shows an increase in the age groups between 40 to 44, 45 to 49, and 50 to 54, but a reduction in groups between 10 and 14 and 15 and 19. So, taken together, like our research shows that the population projections track the whole cohort together, aging forward in groups, and it's not about a parent and child 1-to-1. So the increase to 40 to 49-year-olds is driven by the large young adult group, and a decrease in the children and youth is driven by lower birth rates and smaller younger adult populations in the area. And so this is pretty common when you decipher the data. And so it's very data specific, but we would recommend no changes as a result of this. It's really just really understanding that data shows that middle age group can increase, but it doesn't mean automatically that there would be an increase in like school age children or that general group. Comment number 13. So this is the one about the vision statement. So would benefit from a clear statement outlining its overall mission and primary objectives. Such a statement could briefly describe the goals in the plan seeks to achieve, along with an indication of the intended timeframe. So we cover the timeframes in the matrix, and we're also identifying that it's a 10-year plan. So just noting again, it's the same language that our scope was limited. But after the planning board meeting, we did provide the executive summary, and we are proposing a short vision statement included in that. So we'll get to that, but that's the same recommendation. Comment number 14 was about the hotel being mentioned. So this was concerns about large hotel development, undercutting existing small businesses, saying that there are other opportunities for people to stay in neighboring towns. So we read that. I think we read that. Excuse me, we read that comment into the record last time. So the draft includes the following statement on page 35, this is a repeat, but it's really lumped in with this observation to assess the opportunities to add mix of uses near Washington Street corridor. And then just for clarity, the initial draft was proposing to look at the feasibility. And so based on the discussion so far, it would be that we potentially pull out the reference to the hotel and just consider, that a future action item that the town might take, amongst many in terms of the corridor. And so that might actually make more sense when I can share my screen and show that section. Comment number 15. Just going to push this down so I can read it. Was a comment about a specific sidewalk extension on Bay Road from the intersection to Fairfield Drive. It would allow family housing, pedestrian access to Borderland State Park and some of the other areas. So our observation here is that BSC believes this specific sidewalk project is too specific for the master plan, the street, but I am noting that the street and sidewalk are listed in the complete streets prioritization plan. Additionally, the project would be included under goal 2 action 5, which states, the goal of plan for safe pedestrian and bicycle access to recreational resources and local amenities in existing and proposed residential developments. And so BSC recommends adding an action, which actually got included anyway. So we would propose including an action to continue implementation of projects identified in the town's 2022 Complete Streets Prioritization Plan. So it was helpful that we got that comment because the prioritization plan wasn't listed yet in the matrix, and now it is. And by doing that, we think that the comment would be resolved, through future town discussions. This should be, so it appears that my numbering is off on the left side. I can fix that. Page comment number 16. I think is a separate comment. I'll double check, but page 39 of the draft mentions safe routes to schools, how it needs representation from the school district to participate. Is this something which the East Hampton Schools Director of Finance and Director of Facilities Operations should be collaborating with the town on? So the statement in the plan is intended to reflect that involvement by the school district is required to meet the minimum requirements to become a partner and be eligible for future grants. So we think that the broad statement already covers what this comment is saying, just more broadly, because it doesn't have to be the director of finance or the director of facilities. It could be the superintendent, it could be the school committee, it could be anyone associated with the school. So we're not recommending any changes, but it was a good comment. They're all good comments. Number 17 was referring to Facebook posts about the possibility of a hotel in the industrial park. I'd love to hear more about the future of this in future town meetings. Sounds promising. So it's the same discussion we've already had where it was really talking about the feasibility. We may talk about striking that to be more general. And then the last one, these two that are in red line here are not in the version that was sent to the committee or published online. So these two were two that I missed. Wayne helped me gather these up. The last one was some commentary about density. And this one is just something we should just read. So since because I don't think this one got read in last meeting. Since we're at the point where we have low density and residents don't want to increase taxes beyond Proposition 2.5, we're forced to have service cuts. It is what it is, but it has been said that this is unsustainable in the long run, and I agree. Therefore, if residents want to continue to keep our taxes where they are and subject to Proposition 2.5, I accept, and Easton residents need to accept higher density in the town. I appreciate and support any and all land sales and land development efforts the town employs to bring new tax revenue, whether it's business or residential, even if this includes developing or selling 1/3 of the land in Easton that is already undevelopable or conservation land that is currently bringing no tax revenue. So the response to just make it more objective is that the master plan includes several statements that are related. So under the financial challenges section, we attempt to acknowledge the balance between growth and services. So it says that limited growth in revenue streams is a financial challenge, and it says stagnant state aid, increased health insurance costs, and capital property tax revenue growth stress operational budgets. Infill and redevelopment are important new growth opportunities for Easton to prioritize revenue sustainability. So that was already in the draft. And then under the financial land use and infrastructure section, it included two statements, which is Easton will embrace pro-growth policies and practices to promote economic and housing development, and regulatory boards and committees will assess and may revise policies to maximize development opportunities and economic growth while preserving Easton's character. And so this is a discussion point. This is the last discussion point for the public comments, but the committee should discuss whether a more explicit statement should be included under the financial challenges, sort of related to the need for growth to help sustain support and services, or whether the group thinks that it's already kind of been covered within the plan. So this is a discussion piece for the committee. So seeing none, Nikki as the chair, I don't want to force anyone to vote on this document now. We could get through the draft and revisit this briefly at the end and see if the committee has a different position on it. I guess without a strong opinion, I would think that it's been covered. I think it identifies that Easton has some challenges ahead, which is balancing growth and services. So, I think that there's a safe place for the committee to make no change, but I don't want to push that without.
I think that's fair. I think for now, why don't we just table it, go through, and at the end come back and see if we have developed any stronger feelings on that.
So I don't know, Jeff, if you heard me, Chris. I guess that statement the statements you just read, seems like we were going to go into pro-development. And my only concern with that paragraph you read, it didn't really seem like it was looking at a balance within that process. So we sustained, not only its character, but its greenery, et cetera. So that's my only concern. It's like we're using the vote that voted down the proposal as an excuse to really drive development within Easton due to the shortfalls. So that's my only concern, and I just have to think about how that would be rewritten to make sure it maintains a balance.
I think that's great. So I just typed some notes here to come back to, but I do think that there is a statement in the vision, the executive summary and the vision statement, and then in the land use section, I know that we try to articulate the balance. And so maybe as we walk through the document, we can keep track of that and find out if the committee's comfortable with the way the language is set up to really acknowledge that it is a balance.
If I may just throw out one other piece for our review as we go through the document, I like your points, Chris. I think we're in a difficult situation, and so we need to be mindful of the economics, and yet I don't think it's a blank check to just simply take away all the green space. I do like the fact, Jeff, that the language here, we do have a wall preserving Easton's character. The one thing that we could maybe be mindful of language of as we go through the document is that while what you wrote here says regulatory boards and committees will assess and may revise policies to maximize development, there are some policies that I don't know we would ever be able to change around some of the green space that's like preserved wetlands and things like that. So we may just need to remind somewhere in that line maybe about the fact that, while regulatory boards maybe will make some changes, there are other things that will still hold true. Because I remember our discussions earlier about the amount of land in Easton that is protected, and I don't know how much we would even have the ability to change that ourselves, even if we wanted to, right? So it may be important to state that more clearly so people do understand that inherent in Easton is not only our choice to remain green, but just the nature of the physical land we are on. And if I'm inaccurate in any of what I just said, please correct me, but that's my understanding at this moment.
Yeah,
I think it's great. Oh, go ahead, Ken. Sorry.
Yeah, I kind of feel that those 2 bullet points, I kind of see it as being one where you would say that Easton will embrace Easton embraces development policies and practices that promote economic development and housing diversity while preserving Easton's character. Like, take those 2 bullet points and put them together, because just like what Chris, I think if that was Mr. iPhone that I heard, that, and by the way, my screen actually works now, so I just had to reset it, so I can actually see I can actually see everybody now. But that was my first initial thing, was that pro growth, like, I know what that means, we know what that means, but people read it like, oh geez, you want to saw cut every tree. But I think it's that's the balance, is that we do want to have we want to embrace development policies, because where development works, we want it to work and be, efficient about it. But we also want to make sure that we're not giving away we're not tearing down the trees for the, we're not tearing down the trees to put up a museum of preservation, right? So I think I almost read it like that, is where you would take those two bullet points and you just put them together. And pro growth is just Easton will embrace development policies and practices that promote those good things while also retaining the character. And it says, we have to do this balance, but we also want to be we have a balancing act that we have to do, and it's made more so by the fact that we have the standard small town issue of wanting to increase revenue in such a way that doesn't impact taxes above the 2.5%. So I think that's the best way to put that, and really not have to worry about people getting upset over the actual language.
Just to add to that, I think to Chris's point also, I feel like the recommendations or the actions in the plan try and do a good job to balance economic prosperity with conservation and preservation. I don't know if it explicitly needs to be spelled out, but I think the story is definitely there in terms of the action. I'm not really sure what more could be done to address this comment more specifically, really, because I think it's kind of already there.
Yeah.
So I guess my only question here then is, do we call out specifically in the master plan what is Easton's character? Only because the character of Easton 20 years ago is not the same character as it is today. And as you evolve a community and you develop more, the character changes. So as long as we're calling out what the character means or what it is within Easton based on our understanding as it stands when we were updating the master plan, then we would have something to go back to. But I'm just concerned 15 years from now, 10 years from now, what is Easton's character going to be? How is it defined? And right now, I don't really see how that's specifically called out. So that's my concern.
Yep, Chris, I think that's a good concern, and I would just be real. I'm just going to say that we do not really define the character, not within this document. It's a very challenging thing to do. It's a very logical expectation to define a character of a community, but it's challenging, and it's a bit of a rabbit hole to go down. So I want to acknowledge that, Chris. I think we don't truly just define the character of Easton throughout this document. It's just not the purpose of it. But I think holding on to that and just at least acknowledging the statement as a goal is to maintain the character while providing growth. I think that's where we're at. I think Joanne said, like, we are balancing the two. So I think after we go through the red line version, we should revisit this. Because I think it's appropriate. The one last thing I think I was realizing as listening to your discussion and looking at this comment is there's something about the comment itself which is aggressive, to say that, even if this is developing land that's already protected, kind of the essence of that. And I think that really pulls the pendulum kind of too far, and kind of, overdevelopment is the other side of that, and we're in the middle to try to kind of toe that line between supporting pro-development and we have a lot of language in there about promoting development in already developed areas or in the activity centers, and that's a really strong theme. We talked about that last time, and that's really what this master plan is calling for. It's not calling for going to conservation land and starting to change the designation of those lands for development. So I think the commenter is aggressive in that regard, and I don't think the plan is as aggressive. So I think we'll meet in the middle. But I have a flag here for potentially combining the bullets and talking about balancing it. But I think to make it through everything that we need to do tonight, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen on the comments, and I'm gonna start, I think, with a little bit of assistance from Wayne. I'm gonna go through the matrix pretty quickly, and see, if we have any significant questions about that. And just give me a moment to just move my screens around. But I think by and large, the matrix did not it did not change substantially. Although when I put the screen up, reading it in redline will look like that. But one of the things before I share my screen that we did was in the text of the document and in the matrix, we took any goals that were related to financial sustainability and we moved them. We moved them to the so they're not first, because the discussion was that they are not the top thing that a master plan deals with. So globally, we just moved some of those. We moved the financial goals a little bit later so that it starts with economic development. And I didn't redline that because it got really cumbersome to do that. So I just wanted to make that statement. Um, and then the other statement here is that using color coding, the highlighted items are items that are new that were not in the draft that was out for public review. So I tried my best to keep track of all the changes, but also highlight what was different between that public review draft and what we're talking about tonight.
And I would add on that the highlighted items are not really that new. These are items that were from the 2014 Envision Easton plan.
Correct.
That are still relevant, but not otherwise captured in some of the actions and goals in this 2025 update. So the highlighted ones have been sort of condensed and pulled forward from the 2014 plan to make sure that we have our goals and actions matrix in one place that we can refer to and not have to switch off between two different documents.
Correct. And then I really leaned on some support from Wayne and Stephanie and Ken and others to look at the time frame and responsible parties and some of the funding sources. And so there's a lot of red lines in this document, but I think what it's going to be the most efficient thing is just to look at the left side first. And I would like to just quickly walk through the goals and actions and just talk about what has changed. And again, the last thing is that the actual red lines here are changes that are tweaks. Some of them are, important, but I don't think there's anything significantly different with any of these. But action number one, under goal number one, was added, and so it's a new item. But as Wayne said, if you look at the source on the right, it's the 2014 plan. We just pulled it through. That was the discussion about, which 2014 action items are still relevant and are they included in this master plan.
Yeah.
So we decided to make sure that anything that was still from 2014 but still relevant is now in this plan. And so this is the only document that the town will be referring to in terms of goals and actions. And so that was one of our activities in between the last couple meetings.
Jeff, really quick, is there a way that you can just zoom in on your screen a little bit if you got your rolly mouse wheel, just scroll in just a little bit, because I don't know if other people. Yeah, just enough. So, yeah, thank you. If I can't read it, then probably other people mostly can. But yeah, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Think
The comment on the right.
Very close to the screen, so thank you, Ken.
I got a set of cheaters because the ones my mother gave me don't work very well. So sorry.
Yep.
Just
That's
a
okay.
point, right above on the screen where you see Jeff, it says Jeff Bag screen, like sharing, there's like a circle with 3 dots. If you click on that, you yourself can zoom in and out just for your own purpose and your own screen. So if you need it larger, you can actually do that yourself. Just as a point.
Oh,
Very
I learn
good.
something new every day.
I know that's a good Zoom Pro.
Oh,
Pro.
fit to window. Oh, that's what that's for. Oh, okay. I thought that was the way. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
That is
Thank
a
you.
very helpful tip. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought that was just like a screen, not a magnification of that, but the way that it would fit when you're doing a share. Okay, yeah, thank you. Awesome.
Yep. One more caveat I would like to just share is if you are skimming the whole document, the responsible partners, we are going to make some minor tweaks to that. It occurred to me recently that we have DPED listed, Department of Economic Development, and that has changed to Planning Department. I didn't want to make this red line version any more complicated to read, so that is just a universal change that will appear in the clean copy. So anywhere where it says DPED will change to PD, which is the planning department. So I just want to make that note because it was too complicated to kind of keep track of the changes and be able to illustrate it.
I would just leave it
Um,
as that. I would just leave it as that, Jeff, because I've already talked to Connor about, um, I've already talked to Connor about some stuff related to that. So in all my stuff, I left it as that. And plus we have the general, like catch-all email account that people send us stuff. So,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I painstakingly went through it and changed it to DPED, and then Wayne was like, "No, it's PD," and now it's back. So we'll cover that. But I wanted to just highlight again that the yellow highlighted in yellow are items that got pulled in from the 2014 master plan. So those are new from the public draft version. And so really action one here is maintain critical infrastructure, including roads, water, sewer, and plan and budget for life cycle replacement costs. So it's a good goal. It comes from the 2014 plan. Jumping down to action three, there is a twist here, which is a lot of these are about the QCD. And so the change here is to develop a master plan for the Queesid commercial district, which includes placemaking and feasibility of connecting the corridor to surrounding open space and residential uses. It's just a change in phrase to add the idea of a master plan, just looking at that as a more comprehensive study. Action five, just a kind of a name, just some terminology to go with key roadways. 6 and 7 are struck because they got rolled into action three. So there's a lot of this kind of like just massaging this so that it's just easier to read. So placemaking and signage got put into the development of a master plan for the QCD. Action 8, we are broadening it to just, instead of just the QCD, to say activity centers. And so it's a conversation that the town has had for a very long time. There's areas that are already developed and active and really support development opportunities for housing and or mixed uses within activity centers. So it's really highlighting that the focus there, which relates to our other discussion. Action 9 is organize the business community so that they can advocate for themselves. And we're putting in business improvement district as an example to just give an idea of what might happen within the business districts. 10.
So Jeff,
Yes.
Jeff, can you back up for a second?
Mhm.
When you say
Yes.
activity centers, I have an idea what that is. Can you just please confirm what it means here?
Yes, I will say it and then we should make sure that it's reflected in the actual text. But when we did our community meeting, we called out at least 4. So there's Northeastern, so the downtown area. There's the Queesit Commercial District, which is a distinct kind of area that's identified as an activity center. There is the industrial park, so that would be number 3. And then you got me in terms of stumping me. I think the Washington
Five corners.
5 corners. Thank you. Yes. So the 5 corners. So those are the activity areas that should be referenced in the plan itself. We're taking this backwards, so I can appreciate that. We're taking it out of order because we wanted to make sure we got through this table. But Chris, hopefully that answers your question. If not, let's make sure in the land use section that it's covered properly to define that.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So action 10 comes from the 2014 plan and really engaging commercial industrial property owners and prospective business owners to identify challenges to development and redevelopment and to leasing spaces. So this is really just to really talk to those folks. Those are the stakeholders who need to be talked to. 12 is sort of an internal, like, how does town hall operate? Create one-stop shop for businesses to receive accurate information regarding required permits, forms, including zoning requirements. And so we did actually have a note and that I need to add here that this was going to be in terms of resources. We got a couple of comments that something like this is a staff person essentially, or additional staff of some sort, requires a resource as part of a municipal budget to do that, possibly a grant. But I did have some notes that I needed to add in here, but that's kind of an example of where we're going through the fine details of some of the rest of the table. 14 and 15 are removed because they get incorporated into that concept of the master plan for the QCD. Goal 2 and Action 1 and Action 2 just changed to identify the permit audit that is underway with the town. So it's a report that the town will have to refer to. Action 4 is pulled from the 2014 plan, which says to develop new or modify the existing zoning and regulatory tools to facilitate preservation of historic assets and landscapes. I think we talked about last time that historic preservation wasn't well represented, and that was because a lot of them were in the 2014 plan, but this one got carried through with some help from Wayne that really kind of covers one of the priority items for the Historical Commission.
Jeff, I just wanted to add really quick, since you mentioned the permitting audit, I just put the final touches on it today, and it's all finished and complete. I just had to do some final formatting on it to make it a little bit more easier on the eyes to read. But that audit is all done, and I'll be forwarding it to town administration, just circulating it within town hall to take a look at. But it's I just want to give everyone a heads up on that since you mentioned it.
I think that's a good tip. And then I think it came up at the planning board too. That was something, the planning and zoning board was something that group was going to look at that and be helpful to initiate some of those items. Action 5. So under goal 3, Action 5 was struck because the DIF advisory committee. I think that it had already been in. Wayne, can you help me on this one? Do you recall?
The diff is established.
It's already established. Thank you. That was why. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So we had some overlap. Going down here, so we're at goal 4, which is increase and enhance development in the Easton Industrial Park. Action 4 was changed around to really reflect that business community capacity. So it's really similar to the other one, but there is this notion that there could be a bid or a group that forms solely for the industrial park. And just going through, because a lot of this was already in the draft, so this was in the public review draft, so I'm not going to read every single one, but I'm just trying to capture the changes. This is goal 2 under housing. Action 1 was removed because it's duplicative of, let's see. So if you look under goal 1, we had action 4, which is consider rezoning areas with vacant, underutilized commercial space, industrial, and institutional buildings to allow by right redevelopment for multifamily or mixed use. And that was a repeat, so we struck it because it was already there. I had mentioned how some of the headers had changed. We had a section in the first draft called Other, and it was changed to this one. So we put transportation, connectivity, and communication together in a group. And here is where you see action 1, which actually has slightly different language than I read in the comment block, but this is periodic review, update, and implement the town's complete streets prioritization plan. So that was that discussion about the comment about that specific sidewalk. Anywhere where there's a specific concern about a roadway or sidewalk, everyone should be directed to that prioritization plan. It actually has a ton of projects, and continuously reviewing it, updating it, and trying to implement it is really that's the action that we would like to present. Under transportation, connectivity, and communication, goal 2, we added action 1, which is to identify opportunities for improved lighting, bike path connections, sidewalks, and trail connections for better non-motorized access, especially for children and seniors. And so that was something that we wanted to pull through from the 2014 plan. It's a broad action that covers quite a few different things, and it's important. So those are all good initiatives for the town to have listed in an action. For the open space and recreation set of goals, again, we really pulled from the open space and rec plan for this, except for action number 4, which is highlighted in yellow, to promote sustainable agriculture throughout the community, including on town-owned land. And so that was something that came from the 2014 plan that we wanted to pull through to represent the agricultural commission's goals and other community goals. Here, still in open space and recreation, we added action 3 to improve public outreach communications, including maps and interpretive materials. This is from the 2014 plan. And this section looks rather busy, but this is the climate action plan, climate and community resilience. So the first set of goals and actions were from the hazard mitigation plan. We are removing action 4, which is the FEMA insurance rate maps, which is something that's really just not in the town's jurisdiction. And then coordinating the Morse Pond Dam, that's being removed. Wayne, I don't know why, but it's been struck.
It's an incredibly specific
Too specific.
action. It's too specific, and also we do not want to imply that the town has any liability or responsibility for specific dams that are not under town ownership. So we want to be very, very careful about that.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that help. Then here, I think something I failed to mention before is that as we get through the rest of the evening, we are hoping that there will be a discussion about scrivener's errors. So for those of you who don't know, a scrivener's error is something that's really non-substantive at all. It's either formatting or a numbering problem. And I'm seeing one here, which is that under the climate and community resilience section, we already had a goal 1. And what we tried to do was put in the goals from the climate action plan, and I repeated goal 1. So something like that is a scrivener's error that we would like permission to work through. So this goal would become likely it would become goal 2 instead of goal 1, and it would have that trickle down effect in terms of the numbered goals. But the rest of the items here, I didn't highlight them all. I highlighted the column on the right. All of these are goals and actions that we pulled through from the climate action plan, which we coordinated with the town to get the most updated version, and we basically transferred the top goals and the primary actions into here. And again, the purpose is for someone who comes to the master plan for all of the town's initiatives and goals should be able to access even the climate action plan information, which is new here. My understanding is the climate action plan is being finished and going to be presented to the select board potentially alongside the master plan. So it should be pretty interesting, but we did add these goals in here. And this came after the public review draft because we just didn't have access to the climate action plan at that point. So I'll read them briefly, but I'll read the goals. So goals for climate action plan are that buildings in Easton are energy efficient and minimize climate pollution. Goal 2 here is Easton's energy supply is resilient and sourced from local renewables. Goal 3 is trees, open spaces, and landscapes are sustainably managed and enhance climate resilience. Goal 4 is Easton's water resources are clean, reliable, and protected. Goal 5 is Easton's infrastructure is climate ready and able to withstand climate impacts. Goal 6 is all community members are prepared for and have tools to endure the impacts of climate change. And just for a quick example, the action is really build community capacity for emergency preparedness. So the action itself is really something that will require another step. It'll be a process that town will have to kind of endure to kind of get through that. So none of these are automatic, but they're all listed here. Goal 7 is Easton reduces transportation emissions by accelerating the transition to electric vehicles and enhancing low carbon mobility options. And really, again, the action is reduce dependence on gas-powered vehicles. And so exactly how that is going to occur is something that would be specified and people could find more detail in the climate action plan, but we're not going into that level of detail here. 8 is Easton makes sustainable and strategic land use decisions that prioritize high-density development. 9 is Easton's solid waste is managed responsibly and sustainably and integrated across town operations. So, I know that's quick, but I just wanted to kind of at least read those out loud. They're all in the climate action plan, which is really the source document for those. And then finally, the financial section, which really hasn't changed significantly, but it's just been moved. So here under goal 2 is some of the language that we talked about in the beginning of the meeting was the phrase minimize impacts stays, but we added on vulnerable populations, including but not limited to seniors, veterans, and individuals with disabilities, to try to have that more inclusive statement without, creating another list of specific groups of people. And I see it, Soccer's is saying that's the last item. So perfect. I don't know if I'm allowed Nikki to call on Chris. I saw Chris had his hand up.
Sure. Jeff, quick question for you. In the climate section, seems
Mhm.
like everything was directed towards Easton as the town. But do we need to put any verbiage as far as if not so much residential, but commercial property? Should we talk about maybe that, maybe they, increase their or decrease their footprint as far as energy, increase the energy efficiency as they start developing these or enhancing the industrial park, et cetera. At least take that into consideration. Because you do mention vehicles, right, et cetera, but you don't mention any physical structures as far as private structures, not so much Eastern structures.
It's a great,
A town of Easton.
yeah, that's a great question. My understanding, and Wayne, as we sift and go through I would like to take one more swing through the matrix to talk about the other changes. But Wayne, I don't know if you have access to the climate action plan that you could potentially look. My understanding was that it was focused on the town and the initiatives that the town was able to do
That's correct. Yeah.
rather than pushing or influencing private, homeowners or businesses. So it would be something that the committee would need to take a position on and state that that's a goal that you believe belongs in the master plan to have that in, on, kind of go towards influencing private properties. And I don't know, Wayne, maybe you could take a quick look and clarify whether, or you already did, I think. You said that the climate action plan is really oriented towards town.
That is my understanding, yes, that it
Okay.
is what the town can do as the town.
So Chris, I don't know, maybe that's something we can discuss. I would like to just get through the rest of the matrix briefly, and then Nikki, if you help me remind me that that would be a discussion piece right after I close this screen. But I'm not going to read through all of these, but we've been getting assistance from town staff to help fill out um, the time frame, responsible partners, and funding and resources. So I am not trying to dismiss the importance of any of this, but I don't think I am equipped to belabor it. But you can see under time frame, we created categories for ongoing, short term. Some are short term and midterm, and some are longer term in terms of goals. And we've had this discussion in other communities that this is not intended to say that something that's a short term means that it will automatically happen first. It just means that when it's moved forward as an initiative that the town would like to do, it's a short term action item. So we're not trying to say from adoption of this plan, anything that's short term is automatically going to get done quickly. It just means that when or if it gets chosen to move forward, it should be a short term project. The midterm ones, are intended to encapsulate like a mid period of time that it would take to accomplish such a goal. So there are priority action items, but they would always shift and move around. It depends on funding sources. Um, it depends on the initiative of certain boards or committees to push things forward. But so we did identify the timeframe column, and then responsible partners. The way this is structured is it's abbreviations of either town departments, committees, or other groups. And then where it's possible, we're using bold text to signify that those would be like a lead agency. So you can kind of see it under action 2 because there's fewer red lines, but DPW is bolded. And then the planning department, Mass DOT, and the planning commission are partners. But the bolded item, signifies that DPW is likely the lead entity that would undertake it. And then funding and resources, we do want to streamline the text a little bit because we're going back and forth between a capital budget and municipal budget. And I think we need to figure that out because some of our operating costs, so that would be like an operating budget, and then some are capital improvements, that'd be a capital budget. Chapter 90 is state roadway funding, grants, mass development, and other funding sources. And so we're doing our best to kind of finish this off. There are a lot of blanks. But we did, with Wayne's help and others, we did fill out some and quite a few. So this later section for open space, we have some of them. So
And
know-
if I could interject, for most
Yes.
of the places where the where it's blank, where the funding and resources is blank, in almost every case, it's going to be staff.
correct.
So you look at what that action is and who's really doing it, it's going to be a town staff person. There's not like a special funding source or a special grant or anything like that. It's staff time, which of course reflects back into the overall resource constraint of the operating budget. There are things that the town very much wants to do, but has constrained staff resources to accomplish them.
Perfect. Thank you, Wayne. And then I think I'll stop for a moment and just ask. I mean, I think that's a quick review of the matrix. Some of it you've seen before, and some of it was in those other drafts. So I don't know if that's sufficient. If I can, I would like to go through some of the other red line changes of the document, and then Nikki, what was the thing I asked to come back to you on? Do you remember? I think it was Chris's comment about the climate action items. So based on Wayne's
Right.
response
I
and
could
based
not-
on our
Oh,
okay,
yes.
thanks.
Sorry.
That's okay. Based on our understanding of the climate action plan is it's oriented towards efforts that the town would undertake. So I don't know if the committee has any kind of thought or discussion on what Chris mentioned, which is should the master plan be emphasizing, having the private homeowners or private businesses pursue climate initiatives?
I think that's a little too much into detail because I think on the particular one that I was looking at when it was looked at the transportation emissions, that one particular one about transportation emissions and electric vehicle, you could really just cut it in half. Like the first third of that sentence would be the limit as to what that particular goal is. So I think it was. Let me pull mine open here now that actually works. So if you were looking at it now, just because the climate action plan says one thing doesn't mean we have to do an exact copy paste. But like this one was. Where did I see it? I'm just goal 7, page 56. Easton reduces transportation emissions by accelerating blah blah blah. Well, first off, that's too wordy to be a goal, and really the goal is Easton reduces transportation emissions, period. And then accelerating the transition to electric vehicles, that's more of a policy, and enhancing low carbon mobility options, that's a policy. Those are two policies. But we could say that the master plan update committee and the master plan update could say that a goal is to reduce transportation emissions, and then you leave it open as to how it gets done, because that may get done on certain ways. Again, these are broad statements. We're not climate action plan individually into what they feel transportation emissions by doing this, by doing that, what may work for them. But from a master plan perspective, we got to look at this as a macro, document. So the master plan may say, yes, in a general sense, the town wants to reduce transportation emissions, period. And then however they go about that could be listed, the climate action plan could go into those. But I think from the master plan perspective, we could just say, among the things we want to reduce transportation emissions, period. I think that, and it leaves it open to interpretation as to how that could be done, because you may have areas where, you may want to have different ways to effectuate that could be done in different ways in different areas.
So you were talking, I'm trying to share my screen again. So you were talking about goal number 7. I mean, if the committee is inclined to do that, I am okay with kind of making that particular goal more broad, but I do need to, I guess, make sure that as a process that we undertook, in our charge was to incorporate the the ongoing projects. So just for example, though, like, so the climate action plan had a committee, they have a consultant, they had public meetings, and they came up with these goals through that process. And so that was part of our charge, was to utilize those ongoing processes to inform the master plan. So, I think we're right on that fine line of, going down and starting to change all of them. So it's up to the committee as to how you wish to do it. I do know that they had their own process that we were not part of, but that we were, we wanted to incorporate what what their consultant was looking at and their findings.
I think to your point, Jeff, my inclination is not to, because I feel like we haven't vetted any of this publicly. It wasn't even in the public draft that went out. So any kind of substantial change like that is literally kind of something that this committee on our own would have to kind of come up with. And I don't feel like that's the charge from the select board for what the purpose of this committee was. I think what's in here is reflective of what was heard in the participation process, and then the other processes that the town has done. And if the climate committee didn't go to the extent of looking at non-municipal emissions, I don't think it's our place right now at this point in the process to add anything more specific to that into this plan.
I agree with that. I think there's some overstep or risk that we take on by adding that in at this point in time, given that there was an entirely separate program put together for that.
Okay, I think that's helpful. And Ken, I appreciate the comment too. And I think we're just at that fine line where I do think I agree, like the master plan is supposed to be macro, but I think in this instance, any action that comes out of the climate action plan will have to be acted upon through a process, and it'll have to be investigated and initiated. So it's not an end all be all sort of thing that automatically occurs no matter what. But Kelly.
I was just gonna say, maybe there's a way just to make it super clear that, and I think that's what you're trying to do with that view, is like that we're tying to that climate action plan. As a, like that it's.
Yeah, and I think we tried to cover that in the initial narrative, and of course going from the back of the document towards the front is not great, but that's what we tried to capture, is that a lot of the goals and actions that we pulled them through, and then we had the community meeting and we discussed them, and then we presented them here. But we are relying on a lot of those plans that had their own process, their own community input, as source material. So I think this was a great discussion, so I appreciate it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can reorient myself, and then if it's okay, I think the last significant item, other than a bunch of red line changes, is just looking at the executive summary and the vision statement together. And it seems I'm having the same computer problems that everyone else was having. Mine, okay, it's coming back. It's frozen for a minute.
I do have a minor Scrivener error noted within the vision statement, I think.
Okay, and that's great. We're about to go in there, so I think that's helpful.
And by the way, while we're loading, I do think the vision statement and the executive summary does a pretty good job. It doesn't lay out the character of the town, or what was the definition we were looking for earlier, but I think particularly, I'm trying to load mine too, the vision statement does do a good job of saying that we want to maintain the that last bullet, I think, preserve Easton's historic character, open spaces, and village identity while welcoming thoughtful and well-planned new development. I think that theme is stated pretty well a couple times throughout the executive summary. And actually, while we're there on that bullet, if you see that bullet under vision statement, the very last bullet, village, it says village identify. It's supposed to be village identity.
Very good. I mean, yes, and so thank you, Nikki. I think that's a good segue to just look at this and talk about it briefly. But I think the comments that were received again were based on that draft that was released for public review, which didn't, this whole page was blank. So there is, it would have been nicer to have it released obviously with the draft, but we weren't at that point. But it does help now to look back and realize that the executive summary would serve to kind of create some of this context. So really, again, kind of the duration question came up. So over the next 10 years. So really there's supposed to be a 10-year horizon, kind of a 10-year look ahead. Easton will continue to be a thriving, and this is the text that I mentioned was added. So it'll be a thriving, diverse, inclusive, connected, and sustainable community that balances growth with preservation. And the town will provide diverse housing options so seniors can age in place and young families can afford to stay, support a strong local economy with vibrant commercial districts, thriving small businesses, and expanded job opportunities, lead on climate action, protecting natural resources, reducing carbon emissions, and preparing for changing weather patterns, strengthen public services and finances to maintain a high quality of life for residents for all ages and backgrounds, and preserve Easton's historic character. So there is a little bit there in terms of what Chris was saying. There is a lot of historic character, open spaces, and village identity while welcoming thoughtful and well-planned new development. So that was our attempt to respond to the planning board members' comments who said a vision statement, is, and I think even Joanne had said it, like this would be good to have as part of the master plan. And I think based on all the community input that we've had, all the previous plans, and all the conversations, I don't think this vision statement is a stretch. I think it's realistic. Some vision statements kind of wander wildly in terms of like setting some future scenario stage, but this one's pretty clear and concise, and that was the goal of in writing it. And then just briefly, we did include a purpose of the plan. So we find that most people don't. Shouldn't say most people. Some people do not really go past the first couple pages, or then they skim to some section that is interesting to them. But the town of Easton has updated its 2014 Envision Easton master plan to guide decisions for the next 10 years. The update is not a rewrite, but a refinement that reflects current trends, new challenges, and community goals. The plan helps ensure that Easton continues to be a welcoming, vibrant, and sustainable place to live, work, and visit. And then we're kind of reiterating the key focus areas, really emphasizing that term sustainability. We talked about this quite a while ago, but housing sustainability and just capturing that Easton has added more than 550 affordable units since 2014. However, the rising housing costs remain a challenge, and the plan calls for diverse housing options to meet the needs of seniors, young families, and residents of all incomes. And so, Wayne, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. You and I talked a little bit about in the housing section and the affordable units question. So you may want to cross-reference that statement with what we talked about. We've added more than 550 rental units, of which roughly 25% of those are affordable. So it's a slightly different statement for accuracy there. And also, that was over about the last decade and a half. Some of them, like shovel works, predates 2014 by a year or two. It's a technicality, but for accuracy.
Great, yes, and I just put a note to align with the housing section, so we'll
Yeah.
cover that in a moment. Yeah, Wayne, that's a great catch. I did not catch that earlier. And Wayne was talking about a change. We'll preview that in a moment. But so for economic development sustainability, Easton has invested in new infrastructure and district plans, so I should have an S there, to strengthen its economic base. Efforts include continued revitalization of Five Corners, enhancing the Queeset Commercial District, and expanding growth in the industrial park through sewer access. So that starts to talk about those activity centers. Streamlining the permitting process and supporting small businesses are also priorities. Then for climate sustainability, Easton will complete its first climate action plan in October, identifying high impacts. And so this is some terminology that's in that plan. So high impact strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and enhance resilience to storms, flooding, and heat. Projects include energy efficiency upgrades, renewable energy expansion, sustainable transportation, and protecting key open space and water resources. So those are just summary of those goals that are in that plan. Financial sustainability, Easton faces fiscal challenges due to limited commercial land and a heavy reliance on residential property taxes. The plan emphasizes responsible growth, efficient town services, and creative financing tools like tax increment financing and district improvement financing to spark desired long-term growth. It also stresses protecting seniors, veterans, and other vulnerable residents from rising costs. So I think, in looking at this again after our conversation about the comments, this is another area where it starts to identify, some of the keywords would be responsible growth, and then desired long-term growth. So I think as you all as residents, can help say that the master plan does talk about growth, but it's not unfettered random growth. It's really what's desired in certain areas. So again, nothing about this plan says something is immediate or scattered. It's kind of it's not kind of focused. It's actually really focused. So some of the additional priorities listed: transportation connectivity. So this is really just a summary of the whole document, but roadway and safety upgrades, expanded sidewalk and bike connections, and improved local and regional transit options, public health and community services, expanding age-friendly initiatives, supporting mental health and social services, and preparing for a growing senior population, municipal buildings and facilities, planning for future use of surplus properties, and considering a new senior center. So that is something that came up, and I think highlighting it here is important because that's probably one of the big topics that will come up in the next 10 years in terms of a new municipal building. Open space and recreation, preserving critical natural areas, expanding recreational opportunities, and maintaining Easton's character while balancing development pressures. So again, to Chris's earlier point, we are not defining the exact character of Easton, but we're acknowledging that there is character. And I think we're kind of grouping it in terms of historic, the village centers, and then the open spaces contribute to the character as well. Then community engagement, just quick. This is the end of the executive summary, but this is just a quick public involvement was central to this update. Residents and stakeholders participated in committee meetings, a workshop, interviews, and interactive surveys. At the June 2025 community meeting, residents discussed infrastructure, housing, transportation, open space, and finance in small groups and reported back priorities. The master plan implementation committee met 12 times. I think that includes tonight. To review and discuss trends, challenges, goals, and objectives. The update also incorporates many goals and objectives from other relevant plans and projects, each which included their own community engagement and discussion. And so I think we touched on that earlier. So that's really something that, the community in that public draft did not see. And so I think it's logical that we got some of the comments that we got. Table 1-1 here was amended to reflect the calculations. I think there was a question here early on about the time range, the date range, so 2010 to 2023. We did add this sentence here regarding table 1-2. We got a comment about young adults, and so we added the sentence that the 20 to 34-year-old age group is projected to decline. A major factor driving the shift is the state's high cost of living and unaffordable housing, which make it difficult for younger adults to remain. There was a question as to why would this be happening, and can we articulate that? On this page 10, we adjusted the number of households to better align with the actual census data and the timeframes that we were using in another section. So that's just a small change. And I'm just scrolling through. There was a couple of very minor changes here on page 16. I see Chris's comment. I just want to get through this table 1-8. We had gotten a lot of questions about this table from one of the early presentations. And one of the things that we were able to do was to look at the zoning districts as a percentage of land, and then we just reorganized them so to show more easily that residentially zoned land is 57.5% of the town's land, and then it goes in chronological order downward. So municipal and open space is 31%, all the way down to sort of the business areas, which are, like less than 1% of the land area. Chris has his hand raised. Chris no longer has his hand raised. Okay.
Can you hear
Sorry,
me?
Jeff, if I
Oh,
may.
yes.
Oh,
Okay. No, Jeff, we talked about the aging of the community in Easton, but we also talked about at some point there's going to be an influx of housing, well, houses for sale, shall we say, right? Because of the aging, at some point, those houses would go on the market. So it could potentially cause a shift in the other direction, right? Because we're in a business cycle, right? So, but I don't see anything in this plan that mentioned that, though we did talk about it over here at the senior center. So when I'm just calling that out because you did call out the um the older seniors. You did call out that we have what is it, from 20 something to 30 or 30 something to 40 and change, but we don't. And based on your numbers, within the next 10 years, a lot of those seniors will probably be downsizing. So do we talk anything about that, or are we going to wait until 10 years from now when it happens and we have all this real estate or residential property available, which can cause a whole different problem?
I acknowledge that we don't talk about it in this section, the existing condition section. Like the table, hopefully my screen's still sharing, but I'm on table 1-2. So we are projecting sort of significant growth in the age groups there, the midlife adults and the older adults. But I think to your point, Chris, I think it's a good point. I think what we need to look at is the goals and actions. And I just don't have the capacity to switch screens right now, but I think the goals and actions around housing are to continue to provide and encourage more diverse housing types. And I think that's the way that we would handle it. I don't know that we can count on all the seniors aging out or downsizing, but I think it is a reality. So I think I think we need to check the goals, Chris, and make sure that there's enough emphasis on providing diverse housing types, maybe for changing demographics, and keep it general, because I think that we won't be able to get to that level of detail in this. But if I'm just belaboring it, I think the housing production plan calls for certain steps to be taken. And the age-friendly action plan also probably talks about, looking at the needs for housing of the older population moving forward. I think we wouldn't want to wait and do nothing over 10 years. And I don't think that the plan is set up that way, but I don't know if it's going to specifically address that gap that you mentioned. Nikki,
Jeff,
oh yeah, Joanne, yep, go
I
ahead,
just have one
Joanne.
question. Can you go back to that chart that you were showing with the zoning percentages of land?
Yes. Um,
It
it's
doesn't
my,
add up to 100%. Why is that? What's missing from the chart to get it to 100% of acreage?
that's a good question. I cannot answer that off the top of my head.
Okay. If you could check, yeah, because it seems odd that there wouldn't be 100%
I mean,
categories that add to
my
100%.
one guess would be water, because I don't know if we're including waterways and things like that.
Okay, yeah, that could be a really good
Um,
one, actually. That's probably it. But it might be worth noting that because I think it's confusing for people
okay,
as to why it's not 100%. So
okay,
maybe just add the rest as water or whatever you find it to be.
okay. Let me make a note, and I think that's great because it's the source is Town of Easton, and I need to check that, but it is zoning district, so I don't know I don't know how bodies of water would be zoned, or let me double check this to see if we can clarify that. Do a spell check later. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going because we have a fair amount to still do, but I appreciate everyone hanging in there. Similarly to Joanne's question, we had a couple questions. This is page 19. Um, we had included some data based on assessors records. So it says at the top here, it says 45.7% of Easton's land is in residential use. And then we had a note about how I think we had the term most, wait, here it is. Most residential areas consisted of medium density residential development. And so we were able to clarify where this came from. This was from the 2014 data set. And in terms of a percentage of land cover, approximately 20% is residential, with 12.7 consisting of medium density residential development with 1/4 to 1 acre lots. We had someone ask for clarification. The town administrator asked to clarify that. So we did. And then again, using Mass GIS 2005 land use data, these medium density neighborhoods are generally those built between 1950 and 1970. And it's not precise, but it's along Center Street, neighborhoods north of Easton. These areas were also influenced by the construction of Route 24, increased development along Route 138, and access to public water in the 1960s. Because the question was, well, why? Or what were those areas? And so we were able to pinpoint some maps and kind of clarify that. We just thought it was important to capture that since we were citing it. Here on page 21, we did some calibration. It's interesting how we are trying to calibrate between the housing production plan as a source document, which used 2020 census data, and then some of the more updated data we can get from 2023, the American Community Survey. So we used the 2023 data to establish 9,450 housing units, which increased from 9,132 in the 2020 census. So we had to just revise this section to calibrate between the two dates. And then one of the things that is really dramatic shift, and we're using Zillow to capture the median value of owner occupied units in Easton has increased dramatically. It was at 560,000 in 2022, and it's gone up significantly to 685,000 in 2025. And so Zillow is a source that we will often use for that. But we wanted to clarify this section. There were a couple data points that were misaligned. And here there was this graphic. I made the note on the right. There was a graphic, 2 houses, and it showed what did it show? It showed the number of housing units, and that was causing the conflict. So we just removed the graph because it was embedded in there, and we revised the text above. This chart, the table, it states that there was at least 31 development projects since 2005, and we're trying to say at least because there was undoubtedly more, but in terms of the source document, there were at least 31 referenced in this data source. So a lot of this was clarifying some of the data. Under development constraints, we created a header for available land, which really relates to some of the assessor's records that we were using. And then the town administrator had provided comments to us that infrastructure is also a development constraint that has been discussed a lot in Easton. And so we added infrastructure. So although the town has added sewer availability in certain areas, the lack of sewer is a key limitation to supporting new development in desirable areas such as industrial park. Other infrastructure such as roadways and intersections are also critical to ensuring new development can be accommodated without negatively impacting traffic or safety. So we felt like it was a good statement to include that offers, some of the information about the other infrastructure that's going to be necessary along the way. And resource areas and historic preservations were just added as a title. And then we're shifting to chapter 2. There were some items in this graphic that were changed. We had a couple typos and a couple missing projects. So this chart was updated, and it was we revised the list of projects as well. So we added 2018 for the Queesit sewer completion, the five corner sewer completion, and then the regional 911 dispatch was established. And then we're listing the completion of Depot Street as a major milestone project. So just some clarifiers there. And then 2 changes from here on out, which I mentioned before. We took the financial sustainability discussion and just moved it. You can kind of see at the top of the page. We moved it to after climate sustainability. We think that while it's super important, it's just not typically the first and most important thing listed in a master plan. So we just moved it down to just orient it. And I am striking environmental sustainability. I think that was a holdover from something else. There actually just really isn't an environmental sustainability section. So that was just a big Scrivener's error that I'm glad we're correcting now. Housing sustainability. So I'm on page 32. This is what Wayne had mentioned earlier. We did take a deeper dive into the housing production plan and really are looking at deciphering this a little bit more clearly, where the statement really is that the town of Easton has seen the development of over 500 new rental units in the last decade and a half. So we're trying to give the sense of time without being super specific, because some of our data sources are not as good going back, especially between 2005 and 2010. So that we think it's accurate, but it's a way to put a time frame on that. And then over 100 of those units, I'm going to add units, are considered affordable units. Over that same time, approximately 18 affordable homeownership units have been created as well. So that was really just to break up. Our previous statement was first 400, then 500 affordable units. And as Wayne, and others indicated, not all those 500 units were affordable. So we wanted to just take the time to clarify that because it was kind of an important statement. On the second column on page 32, we're trying to de-emphasize, just remove the alignment, the direct alignment. We want to rely more on the housing production plan, but we've discussed pace and the community compact elsewhere. So we are saying that the goals of the 2022 housing production plan include, and then we're listing them. Under economic sustainability, the town administrator recommended adding this information to acknowledge successful growth. So since 2014, the town of Easton has experienced a significant amount of revenue from new growth. In table 2-1, business-driven growth is shown as CIP. So I think we want to define CIP, which I don't know what it means. So that's a good reason for me to define it. But we think it's important to capture this in terms of new growth. So that's really that section. Under the five corners discussion, the emphasis was really to capture a little bit better that things were completed. So completion of the sewer project under budget, anticipation of 25% designs for Mass DOT tip project, including sidewalks, pedestrian safety improvements and drainage improvements, and then some improvements to Swift Park are included here within that area. And so on page 37, this was one of our big talking points earlier. So this is where the information about the hotel was positioned. And again, it was to assess the opportunities to add a mix of uses near the Washington Street corridor. And so based on the discussion, clarify and comment the question. So I think what I heard the committee say was to strike this latter part of the sentence, and just with the understanding that whatever study would occur in the Washington Street corridor may or may not include looking at a hotel, it may include a wide range of things, and we're describing that as a master plan in the actions. We added a heading for industrial park expansion here just to kind of match the other formatting for those trends. On page 38, this is just some additional updated data. We were referring to 2022, but we were provided with some information as of the end of 2024. Easton's electrical aggregation program resulted in $13 million in savings compared to market rates. So we had been listing some older data from between 2020 and 2022. We updated that. And then as we're wrapping up here, this was probably the most significant number of changes in terms of a section. And I will just say that largely this is because we referenced the community compact, and we didn't quite catch that the community compact only took effect if the override successfully passed. So our premise had changed after we had drafted the document. And so because the community compact did not take effect, because the override didn't pass the ballot question, some of the action items that were originally listed are just going to be struck because they require additional operating funds to accomplish. So this is a section that has a lot of red lines. But in essence, it's really just aligning it with the fact that the community compact is a good document. It is a document that should be a resource, but it's not taking effect. And so we wanted to remove some of the language here. Really kind of talking about the connection between growth and financial sustainability is this first paragraph. So financial sustainability of public services is a challenge facing Easton. It comes out of years of high inflation and structural revenue constraints and is influenced by the historic land use patterns, which are low density single family areas and a significant amount of preserved open space, state park plan and other tax exempt uses. Until recently in the town's history, commercial development was also, sorry, don't know what happened there. Significantly constrained by the absence of any public wastewater treatment capacity. So again, this is looking back, trying to recap 10 years worth of action within the town. Together, these land use patterns result in a large portion of property tax burden falling on residential properties, which is especially challenging to those living on fixed incomes. So really, the rest of this is adjusting the statements around pace. So in 2024, the committee known as PACE was formed by town meeting after 12 months of extensive research, discussion, and community engagement. PACE recommended an override coupled with the critical policies. So some of that language stayed the same. And then really just capturing that the compact was conditioned upon the passage of an override to fund many of its goals. And we're just trying to capture that in June of 2025, voting residents rejected the proposed 7.3 million Proposition 2.5 override, which would provide the town with an operating budget focused on maintaining Easton's high quality of services. In response, town and educational positions and services were cut and will face additional challenges in the upcoming fiscal year. So I think I'll stop because I see Chris has his hand up.
I do. Thank you. I guess my question here regarding the main reason for the deficit is because of high inflation. But wasn't it also compounded by the service facilities we're building, like the new elementary school, the fire station? I think there's another service station that's being
No,
built over.
that was a debt exclusion, actually. That's not part of the operational deficit. The overwhelming driver of the operational deficit, to my best understanding, is unforeseen increases in healthcare and insurance costs were the two real big drivers for that.
So Wayne,
Yes,
I
sir.
guess, should we, because when people see that, they're going to look around and question those new facilities that are being built. Should we note something in here that kind of redirects them so they know that wasn't the cause of it?
I think that could actually be helpful. Yeah, we don't want to monument something very misleading. So Jeff, where might something like that go? And then we can refine the language, perhaps post-meeting, but like where might that make sense to define that a bit more? Got it. Okay. Yeah.
I muted myself. And so I think somewhere in this first paragraph, so really, we got input from the town administrator who wanted to make sure that we were being clear, especially with the community compact. And, Easton has a lot of individuals who are deeply involved in this whole financial discussion. So we got help putting this section together. But I think that we have this paragraph here that is summary in nature. So it says together, and that's the high cost of inflation and health insurance costs. Together, these land use patterns result. Actually, so that's together. That's the land use patterns.
I think that's what actually can be more confusing. So while I recognize that there were folks who are very close to it who wrote this, I think Chris's point is important on and I agree with Wayne's comments that I think we need to clarify what we mean by that, because someone could skim this and think that land use patterns also means the significant building work that we've been doing, just as they interpret it, because they're driving around town and seeing significant building that's done. So whether we seek feedback from town administrator or others to help explain it, just noting that the investments that were made in the new buildings were done as part of a debt exclusion. It was a separate financial tax implication, and it was done to offset the cost of maintaining those buildings. So there's some clarity, I think, that would be helpful for folks. Otherwise, I think they'll look at those land use pieces and misunderstand.
And maybe, and I'm being kind of extemporaneous here, but up top there, you know, it comes out of years of high inflation and structural revenue constraints and is influenced by, and then rather than the historic land use patterns, maybe something by like long-standing preference for low density residential and open space uses.
Yep. We've historically maintained a commitment, right, to higher focus on residential, which does not bring in the same revenue stream as commercial. And that doesn't mean that we should change that, but it does mean that that's part of what we need to understand. It's not the land use patterns is really around our commitment to high residential and high open space, as opposed to other things. So
I think this is a good clarifier. And I think, you know, after that introductory paragraph, I think I just tried to, hopefully I'm sharing my screen. So I made some notes here. Investments made to fund new municipal buildings, and we'll list them were funded through debt exclusion. So we need to finish this language, but this might be the place to draw the comparison between the two and try to help articulate that they're not the same issue. But with that, I saw Stephen and then Kelly. Did you raise your hand, Kelly?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
The only comment I would have is that, yes, it is a debt exclusion issue, but from a taxpayer's point of view, it's still money out of my pocket. So you have to be really careful with the words that you use, not to minimize the fact that, yes, it is money out of my pocket.
I think it's a really good point, Stephen. I think the challenge we have here is that we're talking about the financials of Easton as like Easton's operating budget. So, which maybe we just need to be clear that we're talking about the operating budget as opposed to talking about the taxpayer budget, right? And the taxpayer burden, because there is a taxpayer burden with all of the changes that we've made, which is, you know, why I think folks are struggling with it. But the individual tax burden is separate from our operating budget challenges. Because as a town, we have to have a flat operating budget. So we just need to explain the operating budget portion of this so it's clear which piece of the financial burden we're talking about. The other piece I was just going to suggest we could incorporate to talk about this highly complex and painful issue is that I know we're talking just about Easton, and I don't want to over adapt, you know, recommended language from those who've been close to it. But one thing that is known to us is that we are not the only town facing this. It's not an Easton inflation problem. It's a high inflation problem across the board. So we, you know, Easton, like many towns around us, is dealing with high inflation and increased insurance costs because we, as a town, have maintained a high residential focus. We don't have an offsetting income from commercial.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we touch on that in the trends and challenges. So let's double check that notion that this is not unique. I think that is important because there are a lot of communities that are going through something very similar. So I highlighted the two sections that need a little bit of work. And let's come back to these, but we're pretty close to getting through the whole document. So I'd like to do that to make sure that we can do that, and then we can revisit this one more time before we're done to make sure everyone's comfortable with how we leave that. Where I left off was on the right side of the page under at the middle. Despite the failed override, certain objectives and concepts outlined in the community compact were also reflected in community and stakeholder input gathered during the master plan update and process, including the following. So that's how we're kind of weaving this back through, because there were some really important elements in the community compact that people brought up, especially at the community meeting. We were talking about them. But in terms of land use and infrastructure, these are some of the statements that we talked about at the beginning in response to the idea that Easton doesn't want overdevelopment, only wants single family homes, but really that Easton will embrace pro-growth policies and practices to promote economic development and housing. Regulatory boards and committees will assess and may revise policies to maximize development opportunities and economic growth while preserving Easton's character. And then prioritizing timely infrastructure investments such as new sewer. Then most of this is struck language, but under the header on the left side is minimizing impacts on vulnerable populations, including but not limited to seniors, veterans, and individuals with disabilities. So we talked about that earlier, and really adding some phrases in there to raise awareness on available programs to reduce the financial burden for vulnerable populations. And then this is where there's quite a few actions that would be removed based on the fact that they relied on additional funds. And so exploring options to for the HERO Act or expanding programs such as tax work-off, that we're being told that can't really be accomplished at this point, not without additional funds. So we didn't want to overemphasize it here. The ideas of budget efficiency and annual caps, reducing the spending of free cash and things like that are just kind of not on the table right now as a result of the compact not moving forward. So that was the recommended changes to those sections, just to remove something that currently is unrealistic. Under financial trends, we already talked about the creative use of financial tools. Override and compact approach is removed just because it's not really relevant at this point. But cost efficiencies was added. Easton has implemented numerous cost savings over time, including regionalization of public services, consolidation of departments, solar energy. So this is really trying to highlight the trend that the Easton has had positive trends, public engagement and budgeting. Although Easton has won some awards for its budget document and transparency, the PACE committee heard that residents believe there needs to be an even greater transparency and communication. And then the challenges. And so Kelly, this was where your point, I want to make sure your point comes across here. So structural budget deficits was the existing header, and then the revenue and expense challenges, which led to the FY26 override attempt, signals long-term fiscal strain without increased revenue or reduced expenses, which means public services. Here we're adding infill and redevelopment are important new growth opportunities for Easton to prioritize revenue sustainability. Sustainability of services really relates to service levels were reduced in the current year. Maintaining them are a reoccurring concern. So Easton status. So maybe we're not really covering how this is not unique to Easton, but Easton status as Chapter 70 minimum aid community entitles the Easton Public Schools to the minimum increase in state funding. This revenue pattern does not meet the current inflationary costs. We're adding the phrase including but not limited to this groups of individuals. The current housing inventory has risen sharply in price in recent years and imposes a significant barrier to younger families and seniors on fixed incomes. I think I'll stop for a second as I see Kelly has her hand up.
Yep, no, I think you're right that I don't think this addresses the suggestion around just explaining that like the inflation that we are feeling across the board, especially coming out of 2020 and the impact of that. I think the rest of these these comments are more Easton specific. Not all are, right? Like current housing inventory, but I think like the unfunded mandates aren't just a Easton problem. The unfunded mandates are a problem across the board, but maybe just an opportunity to explain just the general increase in inflation and the insurance cost point that Wayne made is probably something that could be added into here as an extra bullet, would be my recommendation.
Just bear with me for one moment. Is something like this, would this help to acknowledge kind of the notion that some kind of phrasing around the general increases, in inflationary costs and insurance costs are happening throughout Massachusetts and are not unique to Easton? Is that like what you were starting to
That's what I
suggest?
was referring to. I think that the complexity of the problem is that we have that as an underlying component, plus all, plus unfunded mandates and things like that that are happening across the board. And then we have certain specific things like the minimum aid community, like, our choice in terms of the revenue growth streams, like, to Stephen's point, some of the investments that we've already made are burdensome to taxpayers. Like there's just a lot of components that are Easton specific as well as components that are sort of across the board. So, but the inflation and insurance costs specifically, the insurance one is really painful for us. It's well outside inflation.
Yep, I think that's perfect. So I highlighted that. So that's just the third item. I think we're almost through this, by the way, but I think that's the third item. I just want to touch on it before whenever we're done. But future facilities needs is the last thing on this page. Really, the desire for a new or expanded senior or community center was identified during the master plan process and the municipal surplus property project. Assessing the feasibility of capital projects of this nature under the current fiscal constraints will pose a challenge. So it's really just this is under the financial challenges section. So I think that's a important cautionary note for the community to have as moving forward with some of those discussions. If this conversation is not resolved, those are going to be pretty tough. But then I saw Stephen and Nikki.
Yeah, just one small comment. I agree 100% with Kelly about the issues associated with the shortcomings. But I think the town administrator, these words need to come from him, not from us. And that's an important point, at least in my mind it is.
Yep. And this, one of our next steps is to present the plan to the select board. So I think, Stephen, I think your point is well taken. I think it will come through that body to support kind of this position for the plan. But I can't guarantee that because we haven't gone to the select board yet. But I do appreciate that. Nikki, were you going to comment on something?
Extremely minor, but while you're on the page, health insurance spelled wrong, bottom line. Heath Insurance, stick an L in there while you're there.
Very good. Thank you. So like I said, I think we're almost through the red line, and I really appreciate everyone's sticking it out this long. Here on page 44, we heard it in some stakeholder interviews, but really connecting this discussion of the senior center and community center came up a little bit during the community meeting, but as we're pulling through from these other projects, it's really coming through in that surplus property project. That's really, it didn't resonate hugely with us, but in that plan, which we're relying on as a source document, it came up. So we're kind of just trying to continue that linkage between this and that. And one last section, we went through the matrix. Some pretty minor edits to the community engagement section. So we are trying to build this in reverse chronological order. So ultimately, the planning board will be hopefully adopting the plan, and we're slating that for hopefully November. So that will be included where on November 7th, the planning and zoning board adopted the master plan, and then I think we're slated for October 20th. This plan was presented to the select board, and then we went already to September 15th and presented a draft of this to the planning and zoning board, and August 26th, the draft master plan was released for the 30-day public comment period. So we didn't have that information in the draft that went out for public review, but those are items that are going to just kind of anchor that final step in the process. So if my memory serves me, we were going to talk about 2 sections. My memory is not very good. So let's see. Where did we left off here? So on page 40, just recapping kind of this financial sustainability section. So I had in that first paragraph, I highlighted a little bit. So the constraints, some of the constraints to the town's operating budget I mean, I don't know, this is wordsmithing, and I don't know if the committee wants to do this right now, but I think that section needs to just be reworked slightly to capture what the board talked about. And then below that is some kind of statement to at least acknowledge that debt exclusion is not directly the same as the current operating deficit, but I think to Stephen's point, it is still something that the taxpayers feel. So I guess I would seek a little bit of advice whether we want to spend any couple minutes on this or whether the committee feels comfortable with that text being created before this goes to the select board.
I think I'd be fine with, the town planner and Ken and Wayne and you working to tweak that.
Okay.
I agree with
Yeah.
that.
Okay, great. And we've talked about the essence of what it should say. So I think within that, scope, we'll come up with the language to kind of clarify that. And this is not the end. This is not, you're not adopting the plan. So it'll still go to the select board, and there's an opportunity for them to discuss or propose changes that they think should be incorporated. And then there's the public meeting with the planning board where they would actually adopt it. So if any committee members feel strongly that we need to make further amendments, that would be the other opportunity. So it's not a total closed door situation. And then it was the vision statement, I believe. And I hear Chris unmuted. I just want to go back to Chris. Did you want to add to that piece?
I was just going to say if there's any major changes, it would just be nice to alert us so we know. If it goes, you said in front of the select board, they could make changes. I think we should at least be alerted if it's significantly different than what we proposed.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I don't know the exact process. I think we're slated to go on October 20th. There could potentially be an opportunity for the committee to meet, but I think we are trying to go to the planning board for their first meeting in November 3rd. So that's a tight timeline. But I think, Wayne, we should keep our eye on that, like how if the select board were to make some really significant substantive change, how to get it back to the committee. We can work through that. Chris, my fingers are crossed that it's been pretty well documented and vetted. So hopefully there is not something that's like earth-shatteringly different about the plan after the select board meeting. And it's going to be a brief presentation. So it's not, they're not actually taking an action. Correct me if I'm wrong, Wayne. It's an informational meeting for them.
Yeah.
So that should be fine, Chris. And then Stephen, I see your hand up. Oh,
And you're muted.
Sorry about that. On the vision statement makes on a couple occasions reference to senior citizens. And a few pages later, it demonstrates the demographics are changing for the seniors, that obviously the Easton is aging. And I'm wondering if this group understands that, but I wonder if other people are able to connect the dots and see that, oh, yeah, it is increasing in terms of age, and that we need to do something for seniors in regards to housing or whatever. And I wonder if we can make some sort of little mention. It doesn't have to be something terribly big, but just connect those dots.
And Joanne, I know Joanne is pretty knowledgeable with the age-friendly plan. Joanne, do you want to take a stab at any like suggestions as to where we could connect the dots potentially?
Not really looking at it in more detail. Who was that was speaking? Was that Stephen or Chris?
Stephen.
Stephen, can you kind of repeat your point again?
My point is that in the vision statement, it makes reference to senior housing, and a few pages later, the demographics point out the fact that the Easton's population is aging. And some people, not this group, but some people may not be able to connect the dots between senior housing needs and the fact that the population is aging. And that's why I'm wondering if we could put some little blurb in the vision statement.
And so is oh, there it is, sorry.
So I don't think we really got a chance to talk about the vision statement all that much tonight. For me, the vision statement is just that first sentence, and what those bulleted sentences are really goals in the plan. So that was kind of a little bit confusing for me. I know the way that the implementation plan or the action plan has been structured right now is you sort of have a category, and then you have your objective, and then you have your action. I think in an ideal world, these bulleted sentences would be the replacements for the categories that you have right at the end, in your implementation plan. But it's kind of late in this stage to do this. I don't think I have anything helpful to say. I'm a little cautious at even including a vision statement, to be honest, because I don't feel like there was really a significant participatory process for the community on the vision statement itself. And even if you look back at the original plan, there's not a clear vision statement in it as well. So I'm just going to leave it at that. That's probably not particularly helpful. Sorry, Stephen, I don't have any ideas, I don't think.
I mean, I think it's helpful. I think when I drafted it, we didn't want to stretch too far, because I think your point's well taken, Joanne, is that we didn't talk about a vision statement throughout the process, but I think we relied on those really key themes to kind of restate them there. And you're correct, they are goals. Some vision statements would turn those bullets into statements that project what the town will look like in 10 years. So that's one potential option. The one option is just to leave it, kind of just set it as is. It's a generalized vision statement with a summary of the goals that are kind of well understood. Or some of the language could be tweaked so that, it says in the next 10 years, Easton's vision is that it provided diverse housing, that it supported a local economy, that it led on climate action plan, that it strengthened the public services, and that it preserved the historic character. But those seemed like, without discussing it with the committee, that seemed like a stretch to kind of put it in those future terms.
It also just seems a little too specific for the vision. I think you know, to me, a vision statement is that first sentence where you're essentially kind of showcasing what the values of the community are and what they want to see more broadly. I don't think those bullets necessarily have to be part of a vision statement. Because my question is then in reading the report, you know, how do those bullets then relate to the plan that you later present with their objectives and actions? Because those are just categorized right now instead of linked back to the bullets that are up here. So I suspect that the planning board as well might have a similar question, just based on the comments received from 2 of the planning board members, is how does that implementation plan at the end connect to these bullets up here? And I think, I mean, I don't want to get into wordsmithing. I know everybody wants to be done. It's late tonight, but to me, inclusive and diverse, if you are inclusive, then you are by nature diverse because everybody is welcome. I don't know if it's necessary to include both words, but some folks might feel like both words are important to have in there.
I think you can be inclusive without being diverse. So I think I keep them both.
Yeah. Um, and so again, Joanne just said, well, let's not wordsmith, but I can't help myself. So the, I think acknowledging Joanne's statement that the bullets act as goals, summary of the overarching goals, one way to at least cap this off for this stage of the process would be to acknowledge, like in that sentence. So I just changed a couple words, but I said that the key goals to accomplish the vision are include, or like, so some kind of these broad goals are the
Yeah, it's
things
almost,
that would accomplish the vision. And I think it helps encapsulate some of the themes that we've all heard in terms of,
yeah, you're almost summarizing essentially what's in it. I would just put maybe a paragraph space between the first
Okay.
sentence and then that part.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be how it is. But Stephen, I think trying to connect the dots between the projected aging population and ensuring that, you know, those needs are met. I started to wonder whether under this category here for additional priorities, you know, well, that's the first bullet, it shifted around. So it's on the right-hand column, the public health and community services. So expanding age-friendly initiatives is really things that you're talking about. So the entire age-friendly action plan is intended to acknowledge the changing needs of that demographic over time. So I think it's not intended to, I don't want to make it sound superficial, but I think this might be a place to state that, you know, Easton's population is aging. And expanding age-friendly initiatives is going to be critical, along with supporting mental health and social service and preparing for growth of the senior population. I think this is where that statement I think should occur in terms of the most broad, like most people will read this first couple pages. So I don't know if that will be enough to kind of satisfy, you know, what you've raised as an issue and kind of connect the dots. But I think it would happen here. Just again, reiterating that the age-friendly action plan is the document that really is going to dictate most of what Easton needs to do.
That would
Yeah.
be most acceptable, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Jeff, what I see is on the back up at the focus at the housing sustainability second sentence, the plan calls for diverse housing options to meet the needs of residents of all ages and incomes, or ages, incomes, and abilities, or something like that. Because that's a broad, largely a policy, not a goal, but it's a policy. Housing diversity is the overall goal. But if we do it as that, you could just chop it out and say, overall, the plan calls for diverse housing options to meet the needs of residents of all ages, incomes, and abilities. And then you get into the individual specifics. Oh, sorry. You get into the individual specifics of how those are met in their applicable sections. Because obviously the, age friendly is a health and community services type of piece, doesn't really have a connection with the zoning aspect, because it doesn't matter how it doesn't really matter if you have, if your permitting process is different, but you need to have accessibility in terms of your building piece. Whereas the you could have a zoning, the zoning aspect of it could be having higher density and reduced setbacks in, say, the village business district, and allowing for, residential by right or something like that. So ages, incomes, and abilities can be addressed in different areas that all reach the same goal of housing diversity.
Yep, I agree with that. And then I think to Stephen's point, I think like there are a bunch of other things that are potentially going to need to be addressed in order to support that aging population staying in their homes or downsizing and all. The age-friendly action plan is actually really in depth and has a lot of specific action items in that regard. So I think Stephen in the group, if you're okay with me using this bullet here that's highlighted to kind of make that connection that Stephen wanted, I think that's the place to do it, especially in terms of the executive summary.
Would you change the header of it, kind of? So rather than say public health and community services? I think it's a little more expansive than that.
I think we can do that. I don't know exactly what it would be off the top of my head. The public health and community service was intended to capture some of this. Some of the items listed, they're kind of the lead on the age-friendly action plan, but then there's, supporting mental health and social services and preparing for a growing senior population. So I think we could say something like public health, community services, and aging population.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to
Just
get aging
to
population.
get it captured there.
Yeah.
Because it is discussed within that single bullet, and it's later discussed in the whole document too. But that might be the way to draw attention to it, to let people know that that's included in there. And then
Or senior services, I think, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, the senior center is wrapped under the Department of Health and Community Services. It's like split into two major functions, and I think the senior center is wrapped in as like the second half of that large department. It's like the community. It's a function of the community services half, I believe.
okay.
Jeff, just quickly on that note too, senior isn't a word that's often used anymore. We usually say adults age 65 and older, or older adults, just to make it a little less stigmatized.
Okay.
I'm a senior and I don't feel slighted in any way being
There's a
called a senior.
mix. Yeah, there's a mix in the age-friendly planning process, which I was involved in. It was a big discussion.
What was the second term that you used?
Usually, older adults is often used, or adults age 65 plus. But you see the state moving in that direction as well too, with the renaming of their department and the way that they're putting out their plans and stuff. It's considered to be more inclusive language.
And you better change senior from the whole package.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm kind of feeling at this point because we reference it as health and community services everywhere else, action items and things like that, and the responsible parties and just. I also don't want to get too marred in the details of, you know, you don't want to get too marred into the details.
I agree with Ken. We're there. We're in those details. I think what I would propose, it's getting really hard to work in this document and share screen and talk. I would propose we keep it similar to what we had. And make sure that this preparing for a growing senior population is really a little bit more emphasized. I think that's really what would cover Stephen's concern. And so we can take out the word senior and really preparing for the
Aging.
growth and the growth in the age 65 plus demographic or something. Stephen, that's what that's what we're gonna have to do to kind of make the connection is use this.
That's fine with me.
Okay, just because having this discussion was really helpful because I do think that the Public Health and Community Services Department is the department who would oversee most of that activity, other than housing, as Ken said. So, I appreciate this. It's really helpful. Tana, did you have your hand up for a second there?
I did. I was gonna say almost exactly what you just proposed, that just to put it back how you had it and preparing for a growing 65 plus population, because that's what our data shows us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's fine, because you're summarizing now. You're not trying to explain everything. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Stephen, I'm really trying to kind of make that connection. I think this is the best way to do it, given that the document overall is very high level. If you haven't, I would encourage you to look at the age-friendly action plan. It does lay out a lot that the town is going to have to do.
What you've done is fine.
Thank you. So unless I'm missing something, I think we made it through the entire updated document. And so hoping that the committee feels comfortable, I think maybe voting to recommend that this move forward, I think was the target for tonight. Our action is to accept all these edits, clean up the formatting, and provide it to the select board. And my understanding is that I as BSC, your consultant, will do a brief presentation to the select board at their meeting on October 20th. And I think it could be very great if someone from this committee or more than one member were able to attend and maybe be present to help acknowledge all of this group's hard work. Just a pitch. Wayne, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I think we did it all together, and having someone else there would be helpful just to show that support.
It would if people can make it. It is likely going to be a timed item on a very busy select board agenda in person here at Town Hall on the Monday evening, October 20th. So once an agenda is up and posted, if folks could stop by for that period, that would be super helpful. Not necessary, but very nice.
On my calendar.
Thank you.
Okay, do we need to make a motion on how, yeah, we do. On accepting the edits, how do we say this, as I know Jeff and I think we have a couple other edits that are going to be made at a later date prior to submitting it over to the select board.
Would it make sense to say something like accepting the proposed edits and recommending the updated draft move forward to the select board? Something like that.
And then maybe just it would be good to just acknowledge that there could be scrivener's errors that we catch between now and then. But I think if you got that, it would be based on the discussion and edits tonight.
Yes.
Allowing for scrivener's edits, for that version to move forward to the select board.
Okay, so I can make a motion to accept the edits and other relevant, I don't know. How did we say that? You said discussion, as, or accept the edits as discussed this evening, tonight, including any Scrivener errors. Sorry, I'm exhausted now.
Yeah, and as the one who's gonna have to like actually do the minutes, I'm trying to think, what is the actual vote language we're gonna do here?
Yeah.
A motion to uh, approve, a motion to accept the
Proposed and discussed edits,
proposed and discussed edits and
as well as
and potential Scrivener's errors, and recommend the master plan update draft be referred to the select board for
consideration.
consideration and comment.
Did you get that?
It's all being recorded. I'm gonna have to go
Oh,
back and look
perfect,
at it, but I
perfect.
think
I
that,
hate to do this. I would want to. Okay, I
Please
just have
do,
one,
yeah.
one more question, which is, would this be maybe that's motion one is to move it to the select board. So you had that language, but then I think maybe there would be a second vote to recommend it to the planning board too, because we want to take both of those actions tonight. I think, right? I think that was something that the master plan update committee, I think, is charged with making that recommendation for the planning board to adopt the plan. Do you think that's correct, Wayne?
I think so. It could be one motion, but then
Okay.
we have in there if the select board has anything significant. This group would certainly want to know about it.
Yeah, I think it would need, if anything, to be like a contingent motion, like a motion to move the plan straight to the planning board if the select board doesn't have anything significant to change.
Yeah,
However, if they do, then it needs to come back.
yeah.
I think that makes sense. I think that we could work with that.
Okay. So I can make the first motion. And it is to make and accept the edits as discussed tonight, as well as any potential Scrivener errors. And did we say forward the updated master plan document to the select board for consideration and comment? That's motion one.
And what are we doing to the select board? We're moving it forward to them. What are we doing? Scrivener's
For
errors?
consideration and comment.
And yep.
Babbitt,
second that.
second.
Okay. Dostumian, yes. Babbitt,
Yes.
Zygmunt,
Yes.
Defensor,
Yes.
Percio,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Lopes, and Kirkland.
Yes.
Okay.
Hello?
And Lopes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was on double mute.
Oh, sorry.
No worries. I just didn't hear the first motion. I heard the second one. So as long as it,
The first
as long
motion is
as-
to make and accept the edits as discussed tonight, as well as any potential Scrivener errors, and forward on to the select board for consideration and comment.
oh, I'm sorry. What I meant to say is I didn't hear the first person make the motion. I just want to make sure you got the first motion.
I
With
did.
that said, okay, great. Then yes.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Drown, yes.
Oh, I didn't get you. I'm sorry. Am I missing anyone else? They're all up on top. Sorry. Okay, and so the second motion.
And I think Joanne had some language on that one, right? So it's what, a motion to
A motion,
go ahead,
Yep.
please.
a motion to move the draft forward from the select board to the planning board if there aren't any substantial changes by the select board. However, if there are substantial changes, it comes back to this committee before moving on to the planning board.
Brown seconds.
Dostumian, yes. Drown,
Yes.
Lopes,
I just have a comment before I respond. To me, a significant update would be if the hotel verbiage shows back up in the document. Other than that, I say yes.
okay. I think we can proceed. Zygmunt,
Yes.
Kirkland,
Yes.
Babbitt,
Yes.
Defensor,
Yes.
Percio,
Yes.
Davis.
Yes.
Okay, do I have everybody? Uh-oh. All right. Okay, so with that being all done, then the last agenda item is a potential next meeting. And did we determine if we need another meeting or?
I think our fond hope is we're done with actual meetings as of
Right.
tonight.
Okay,
Do you want to put in a placeholder in case there is something that the select board changes, or do you feel pretty comfortable just not? I don't know how much access they've had to the draft, so I don't have a feel for whether or not they're likely to do that.
Well, I
I
think
don't
from
mind.
they've had various levels of the various drafts that have gone through, and I think with the where we are at this point, you know, part of the time would be like, if you've waited this long to give us comments, first among equals in terms of them and some comments, but with the town administrators' comments and getting those incorporated, and suddenly changes now that would come in that, you know, now all of a sudden they've been coming in. I think there's I think the general push is that, you know, we'll take some stuff, but it's not necessarily we don't want to go back and, you know, completely rewrite entire sections of this thing because, you know, section was put in that was always in and nobody had any issues with until now at the very end. I don't see that happening because the various updates that I've given to them and the town administrator as well as this is moving along. But I think it would just be it'd be beneficial if we kind of drew the line and said we've come this far, we've had input, we've asked for input multiple times, and we've had this process, and we're set to go, and we're trying to get this done for the year, and we want to finish things up in a timely fashion, and it has to get to the planning and zoning board, and there's timing with that as well. And I think I'll just leave it at that.
This is Sahara. I don't see a problem with putting a placeholder just in case, but that's just me.
I say we do it so then we can wrap up. Let's just put a placeholder in and call it a night.
Okay. So it will have to be after October 20th, correct?
Yep.
And should we try for a Wednesday night?
Yes.
So that would be the 23rd?
We've got the 22nd or the
22nd?
29th, probably the 22nd.
I would say the 22nd, if that works for everybody. I'm available.
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, so let's put a placeholder in for October 22nd at 6 o'clock.
Great.
Great. Okay. And then I can make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay. Babbitt,
Yes.
Drown,
Yes.
Defensor,
Yes.
Percio,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Lopes,
Yes.
Zygmunt,
Yes.
and Kirkland.
Yes.
Okay, so at 8:43 we are adjourned.
Thank you all so
Good night,
much for your
everyone.
time. What a long
Thank you,
night.
everyone.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate
Good
it.
night.
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
Bye, all.
Bye.
Be well.